Last month, on November 19th, 2019, the New York Times posted a feature story written by Eliza Shapiro and Brittany Newman entitled 114,000 students in NYC are homeless. These two let us into their lives. The story follows 8-year-old Darnell, who lives in a homeless shelter and has a 15-mile commute to school, and 10-year-old Sandival, who shares a one-bedroom with her family and has consistently moved around this year. The article claims New York's homeless students, quote, live in plain sight. They study on the subway and sprint through playgrounds. At night, these children sometimes sleep in squalid, unsafe rooms, often for just a few months until they move again. Homelessness is an issue that affects our country as a whole and Putnam County. In this episode of The Unexamined, I spoke to both a brave woman willing to share her experience of homelessness and a team at Beyond Homeless in Greencastle who've impacted her life for the better.
My name is Kaylee. I am originally from here, but I also lived in Franklin, Indiana for about 15 years. Life kind of got the best of me. I left home when I was 18 and moved in with a guy, and then ended up in Georgia. Ended up pregnant, and then I came back to Indiana. I had a little boy. He is now 8. He just turned 8 right before Halloween. We got our own place, and then I kind of got in with the wrong people, and my best friend was kind of dating a drug dealer, and so then I started doing meth real bad. And life kind of just went downhill from there. I was 18, I was working, I was just ready to, thought I was ready to get out on my own. And I met this guy, and I just kind of moved in with him and didn't go back home for a while. But when I finally came back to Indiana, I started school for cosmetology and was doing really good for a while. I was working part-time and going to school, taking care of my son. I was living at home with my mom and dad. And then I got in some trouble. I had a case from 2011 that came back and bit me in the butt in 2015. And so it caused some issues in my life. I ended up on house arrest, home detention, for 9 months, and then probation. But then I started hanging out with this guy I went to high school with. I was really good friends with the mom of his kids, and so it was just normal for us to be together. I used to go out to his house when we were in high school and hang out and whatnot, and then he was doing meth at the time, and I didn't really realize it, but at the same time, I had been to rehab enough by that point that I knew what was happening. I kind of knew my relapse was coming before it ever happened. But it got the best of me this time. I've been homeless for the last almost 3 years. Had I not moved in here, this would have been my 3rd winter in a row that I would have slept in the car. I really didn't have a horrible childhood.
So there's nothing traumatic?
Well, I had one babysitter that I was at where there was an older boy who used to molest me. And then, so we switched babysitters, and then we went into a babysitter who used to abuse us, and mentally and sometimes physically, and half the time she wouldn't even be up when my mom needed to drop us off, and it was just awful. So things like that. But as far as at home with my parents, before my mom divorced her first husband, he was abusive. He was an alcoholic, so I did grow up seeing a lot of that, but my parents themselves were not horrible towards me. She got divorced when I was 8 and then remarried when I was 10. And he actually adopted me when I was 10. I didn't know my real dad. And ever since then, like, my childhood has been great. They bust their butts to make sure that all of us are taken care of. They're actually taking care of my son right now also. I just kind of started hanging out with the wrong people at school. And
Do you think, though, because you had those traumatic experiences, that you were using your relationship with the bad crowd as a way to compensate for that?
Absolutely.
Is it a cry for
Yeah,
help? Okay.
yeah, it was. But at the same time, like, for a long time, my parents didn't really know the truth. I was diagnosed when I was 10 with not bipolar, with depression. And I started seeing a therapist. But it wasn't until I was actually an adult, until I was in my 20s, that I was really openly honest about those incidences back when I was that young with somebody. This is where I'm supposed to be in order to get my life together. The ladies that work here are extremely wonderful, and will take it case by case. And if you need any help, even if you walk in off the streets and say, hey, I just need some food, you can get some food, and they'll put you a little bag together to send with you. And it's just welcoming. Homelessness is not fun. I've seen people sleeping under bridges on the streets of Indianapolis. I have, seen campsites, literally like tents put up with all their belongings and blankets and pillows tucked underneath bridges, or just in alleys somewhere, and that's not fun. It's not fun to even if you have a car, you have to find a parking lot where the police isn't going to mess with you, or somebody else in the community isn't going to mess with you, and it's just not fun. So to have a place like this that is just willing to take it case by case, and whatever you may need, they will do their best to help you with it.
Lynn Weber. I am president for the board of Beyond Homeless, and I got involved with Beyond Homeless about 3 years ago, and was originally board member serving on the finance committee. My day job is at DePauw, and I work in finance there, so it lends itself that I'm a finance person and was working on the finance committee for Beyond Homeless. The opportunity arose to be president of the board, which I took. Since then, we've had some transition at executive director, but that's a good way to kind of segue and introduce Lee, who is taking over as our new executive director. She has been here a whole week now. Turn it over to her.
Hi, I'm Lee Durbin. I am the new executive director of Beyond Homeless. I have been in the philanthropic field for roughly 10 years now. I actually started as a volunteer, so everything I learned about the nonprofit world, I learned as a volunteer. And then it just was a natural segue into an actual career path about 6 years ago. So I'm really excited about this. Helping struggling families rise is something that's really, really near and dear to me. I just think that the opportunity to help a family who's on the verge of homelessness is critical these days, and I think that this is the perfect platform, and we're in the perfect community to be able to really have an impact there. We are pretty specific to just Putnam County and the surrounding counties around Putnam County, but we aren't just an overnight shelter to get someone in off the streets for one night. We are actually a program-based shelter, so each family and individual that comes in, there is a long process that goes into that, but they actually have to get a job, they have to look for affordable housing, they have to go through certain program requirements that we have. And then there are rules within the shelter as well. So it's not just getting them off the streets, it's literally giving them the life skills to build a sustainable life outside of the shelter where they're actually independent. We actually have weekly goals, so it's a 30-day initial stay, and they actually they create their own goals to get themselves sufficient, and then they meet with the case manager every week to go over those goals and to show that progress. And as long as they're tracking towards those goals, Obviously, it's hard sometimes to just say, oh, I'm going to get a job and get an apartment and be on my own. So as long as they're tracking towards those goals, we work with them very closely to make sure that they get self-sufficient before they step out on their own. We don't just turn them out if they're doing what they need to do. Now, if they're not doing what they need to do and they're in noncompliance, there's a disciplinary process in place that they get. It's basically a 3-strike process. And so they can be terminated if they refuse to follow the program guidelines and policies. I would like to try to implement some just mindset type things with the residents too, to teach them how not just to set a goal for saving money or a goal to keep a job, that kind of thing, but just something that they can personally, if there's something that they really want to get, whether it's something that's tangible or material, just to be able to have that mindset of, I'm worthy of that, because so many of that, I think a lot of that is, there's so much from a self-issue and a self-worth type of mindset that they come in with, that they just don't understand that.
So in terms of dreaming big, something that we're asked about often is men and having a shelter that would be able to house men. We have seen, in terms of what other shelters have done, that it's just a best practice to not have in the same facility men and women and children, because some are fleeing a domestic violence situation. There are some other hurdles to that just make it difficult to do it within one facility. In the prior iteration of the shelter, there was men at this shelter, so you can still see there's a men's restroom, men's shower, men's bathroom that we've now repurposed for some other things. But 5 years from now, I would love to see a men's shelter, and either it be part of Beyond Homeless or part of another organization that we're able to partner with in the county. The need is definitely there. We hear about it all the time. We don't just turn people away without any assistance, but I wish we could do more for them.
For me, when I get home at night, it's the old-fashioned thing, I lay my head on my pillow at night. I know I helped somebody do something good, and I don't have to worry. So that's what it is for me. And when I wake up every morning, it's that I get to help somebody rise, and I get to make a connection with somebody so they actually can see that they matter in this world. And I think that that's what some of these, especially the young girls, I think that's what one of the big issues is they come in and their self-worth is so low. It's just showing them that anything, you literally can do anything if you have the right support group around you.